this gentleman talked about how the Atmanirbhar Bharat plan should focus on high-cost, high-quality products. Well, we're catching up again several weeks later, and this time around, India is facing bigger problems than how to become self-reliant. We've seen Q1 GDP estimates come in at minus 24%, arguably the worst hit globally, or one of the worst hit globally. Our COVID positive cases overall have just crossed 50 lakhs. I'm pleased to be joined once again by Rathin Roy today on the show. Rathin Roy, of course, Managing Director of the Overseas Development Institute. Rathin, great to speak to you again. Let me begin with those two numbers. And that really is our conundrum, isn't it? Minus 23.9% at one end and 50 lakh at the other. The minus 23.9% took place to avoid a 50 lakh situation. It hasn't helped. And right now, any policymaker is wondering whether they need to lock down again to control the numbers or keep opening and live with higher infection rates. How do you look at this puzzle?
Well, I think the lockdown was missold to the public. I don't think there was any expectation, at least amongst reasonably intelligent people, rhetoric apart, and Mahabharata around that apart, that the lockdown would do anything more than give the country time to prepare medically for a surge in COVID cases that was inevitably going to happen. And indeed, that surge has happened, and indeed, we are better prepared medically, though we could be much better, at least in the urban areas. You don't see pictures in Bombay or Delhi of people lying, on the street or outside hospital bed wards like you saw initially in Mumbai, in the first third month of COVID. That being said, therefore, it would not make any sense to further lockdown unless you have a problem with the medical, infrastructure not being able to cope. Therefore, the question is that how do you live with COVID, as you said, and continue to restore manufacturing, continue to restore services, and continue the only positive sector, continues in that fashion, which is agriculture.
Yeah, but it is sort of linked, you would agree, Rathin, simply because a lot of the estimates for further shrinking of the GDP in this financial year are based on the fact that our cases are out of control. We're not even talking about flattening a curve anymore. So it's not as if we can ignore that 50 lakh number or the fact that we're clocking 83, 84, 85,000 new daily cases. It is hampering any kind of economic revival as well, isn't it?
It is, but not possibly because of the cases. See, if you look at the total number of cases, Tamanna, and even without going to demographic profile, as a proportion of the working population of India, they're very small. So it continues to be, under 1.5% of the total population. And we have a long way to go before it even becomes 10%. That would mean 100 million people, active cases, right? Then that would make a dent in our labor force of 50 million or 40 million. Problem is that because we have this, we are not able to flatten the curve. Both the confidence of consumers and the confidence of producers that India is moving into a path of greater economic certainty, that continues to be very fragile. There is simply no confidence that India is moving to a path of greater economic certainty. I would argue that many of the stimulus packages that were given in the developed countries but not so much to sort of, keep the economy afloat, but also to instill consumer confidence. And we have not done anything except tell people that they can borrow money more cheaply to instill consumer confidence. And I think that is at the root of the problem. If I'm a worker in Bombay, I'm scared to get out of my house, I'm scared to take an auto, I'm scared to take the train, I'm scared to go to a restaurant, I'm scared to go to a mall. And when COVID cases drop, then that fear goes and confidence comes back. So as a society, we are facing a loss of confidence. And now, regrettably, that has extended to rural areas with COVID spreading there. So I'm a bit worried in that sense about agriculture going forward. I was hoping that agriculture would continue to be positive, but even that may be impacted by the spread of COVID to rural areas for this reason. Lack of confidence and fear.
Let me come to the aspect of, the agricultural sector specifically, because that's the bright spot right now, right? That's where all sort of the hopes have been pinned. And that is showing a departure from the overall gloomy mood. Do you think that this is sustainable, or what can we do to sort of enhance this growth?
Well, let me point out first, Tamanna, that the agriculture is the only bright spot because it's growing at the same low growth rate that the Indian economy was growing at last year. So all that has happened is that is also not tanked. So now we have to worry about the Rabi harvest. The Kharif marketing is over, so I don't think in Q2 we'll have a problem. And we have to make sure that the crop is sown, that is harvested, inputs are provided, and then it is marketed in early winter next year so that Q3, Q4 agriculture continues to hold up. That is not technically impossible as long as the state governments don't run out of money, initiative, and energy to stay the course. And what worries me in the current sort of, how do I put it, the current tension that has been generated by this GST controversy and loss of faith in the centre's ability to meet its promises is that state governments may either not have the resources or the confidence again to continue to support agriculture as aggressively as they have done in the past. I'm sure they'll do their best. So I'm a little worried about agriculture. The first quarter may not be a guide to the second, third, and fourth quarters.
I want to come to the issue of center, state, and GST in just a bit. But before that, Rathin, I want to get your sort of overall assessment of where we are. There is some data that indicates that we may be on the path to, recovery to some extent. Your IIP contraction is reducing. For some sectors, there is an improvement, auto, etc. Some high frequency data tells us that perhaps some amount of demand is returning, etc., especially when we talk to companies. Do you think that we are on the path to recovery, or are we looking very shaky? Because after all, the 23.9% drop was largely because of a lockdown that has now effectively ended.
Yes, that's a very good question. So let me start by pointing out that when we talk about restoration, we are just talking about getting back to zero. That's the first thing. And there is no reason why that should not happen unless there's a dramatic increase in COVID cases necessitating lockdowns and other such punitive measures going forward, because they will reduce confidence again. Restoration means we move to, it's not going to be possible in my view to move to zero growth this year, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Because with minus 23 in the first quarter, you'll have to grow at 15, 16% in every other quarter just to hit zero, just arithmetically. That ain't gonna happen. So we are looking at, in my view, I was the first to say this since I'm not data-driven, and now your Bombay data-driven economists are coming to my conclusion. I think I said this on your show or somebody else back in June, early June, that I'm expecting a nominal growth rate drop of between 13 and 17%. And that is exactly what it is panning out to be. Yeah, in very bad shape. A 13 to 17% fall in income, even if evenly spread, means that somebody earning a salary of 20,000 rupees a month is going to see their income drop, if that just happens, pari passu, assuming they keep their job, from 20 to 17. So that lost 3,000 in demand is going to make recovery next year weak. It is the fact that the demand is not there means that many companies, especially services, that are used to supplying at a certain level of demand will see that demand sucked out. If they go out of business, then their assets will be destroyed. If their assets are destroyed, then they will either have to be bailed out, which means that the bank balance sheets will get worse, or we will have to let that asset destruction happen, which will give us a weak growth base next year. That's a very bad place to be in, because I'm not even talking about here, I'm just talking about what we can do to get back to that horrible rate of growth that we had last year. It was a horrible rate of growth. It was 3.1. So I'm talking about moving from literally a tsunami to the tail end of a cyclone. Business as usual, as we have known it in our lifetimes, is not going to come back to this country in any segment for a long time to come.
What do you mean by long time, Rathin? You want to put
at least
a time frame?
At least 3 fiscal years.
At least?
3 fiscal years.
Oh, wow. So we're looking, let me get that again straight from you. So you are saying we're looking at least 3 more fiscal years before we come back to normal.
Normal meaning a very bad normal. A single digit -5% rate of growth, yes.
And is that a problem?
By the way, I need to clarify. All these things have to be measured compared to 1920. So I'm saying for the economy to grow at 3.1% compared to 1920 will take 3 to 4 years. Obviously, this year if you're -13 and next year you are -5, you'll say my growth has gone up by 8%. That's what they will tell you, mark my words. They will tell you that. So you have to be very alert, your listeners. Take that 2019-20 rate of growth, 3.1. We are asking when can we get back to 3.1% over 2019-20, and I'm saying that will take you at least 3 years.
Okay, so now I want to understand this from you in a little more detail. Do you think that this is an issue endemic to India? Because we're seeing the whole world struggle at different phases, at different rates, and with different situations. But is this a typically Indian situation, perhaps because of the weak economic trajectory we were on pre-COVID?
Correct. It is precisely because we were already on a weak economic trajectory pre-COVID that our ability to grow, to get back is being hampered now, one. Second, we have to face it. The kind of COVID spread we are seeing 6 months down the line means that there's going to be a loss of confidence which will result in some asset destruction for a long time to go now. And that asset destruction, as I said, will further weaken financial sector balance sheets. If it weakens financial sector balance sheets, then our ability to grow in the future is limited and hampered by that. So yes, we are going to be, I think, in a bad situation for a long time. The government's response has been, and I congratulate them for it, that we are going to bite the bullet, we are going to have some structural reforms, and those reforms will bring back what was not there before 1920, which is a business environment in which you will get high growth. But I have to wait for those reforms to come. How do I even believe that when today a CBI court has reopened a disinvestment case going back to 2002? How do I believe this rhetoric?
I want to come to the situation which we are seeing between center and state. And that really, I think, is one pain point that has not gotten enough attention. There is currently a 3 lakh crore rupee hole. And there is a fight now about who fills it and how they fill it. What is the implication of underfunded states right now? And if you had option 1 and option 2 that states have been given, what would you pick?
I would continue to argue, as I've been doing, that it is the responsibility of the sovereign to make sure that all parts of government get resources as cheaply as possible. And because it is within the borrowing powers of the government of India to get resources as cheaply as possible, if GST compensation is not feasible, then that compensation must be made good by borrowing by the government of India. I can give you other options, but that is the ultimate option. So, for example, one option, since you're Bombay people, is for the Reserve Bank to open an 11-month interest-free WMA window and use its reserves to fill this hole over a period of time. You don't have to fill the whole hole at once, right? But that would mean a fall in Reserve Bank reserves, which would then be restored by the government of India as and when they paid the GST compensation. You could work out the mechanics of this in a number of ways. But it is undoubtedly a fact in my mind that it is wrong to make the states borrow or increase their limits to borrow because the government of India is unable to honor a commitment made by its own finance minister on the floor of the House 4 years ago. That commitment does not suspend due to force majeure. And the government has accepted this in the concept note they wrote, and I congratulate them for it, the government of India. But they must now honor it. And it is not being honored if you tell state governments to increase their liabilities as a consequence of what is happening, and then just make promises to underwrite those liabilities going forward, because you've just broken a promise, and it's unlikely that further promises will be believed. Situation is very simple. Borrow and give it to the states, and then offset it against GST compensation in future years. Fine.
I want to come come to the issue of demand and income support. Now, once again, we're hearing about income support as a tool that the government should use. And there are various iterations of what they could do. I think you have talked about an urban job support program akin to Manrega. There are other income support formulae out there. Do you think the time has now come for income support? And does the government even have the fiscal room for all of this expenditure we're talking about?
The time for income support was 6 months ago. Now, with this kind of negative 23 GDP contraction, the power of income support will be limited because businesses are doing badly. And unless the government is able to specify a time frame for this income support and specify which sectors will get it and which sectors will not, and get a commitment from the activity areas where this income support is being provided, that those activities will be restored as a condition for providing income support either to the entrepreneur or to the worker, this will not work. I have been saying repeatedly, and I do not understand why the government has been so slow, so slothful in acting on this, that financing is not the problem if you are able to come up with a 3-year spending plan where every item of spending you say very clearly how this is going to help restore economic activity and therefore GDP, either through restoring consumption or through restoring investment. A 3-year plan. In a 3-year plan, what I need to know is what at the end of it will be the increase in debt and what will be the kind of fiscal deficits we will see at the end of 3 years. Once I know that, I can take that 3-year financing gap, and I have been suggesting several instruments, and it pains me to see that other countries in the world have adopted them, but India has not. For example, a console, or what the European Union calls a bond in perpetuity. People are saving out of fear. It's called precautionary saving. We knew it would happen. Therefore, what you can do is offer them something at an attractive rate of interest and say that you will get this interest every year for the next 3-4 years, but I will not pay you back your principal. And I will not tell you when I will pay you back your principal. I will start announcing from fiscal 25 tranches in which, if you want, you can take the money back. That would restore huge confidence in the economy. I have suggested using the WMA route to finance states to increase economic activity. I have even said that there is nothing wrong with monetizing the deficit if you give me the plan about what you're going to do with that money. You can't just say, I'm going to monetize the deficit to build infrastructure. I will question you. Nothing, you're in Bombay, that Bombay airport, how late is it? Then I get excuses. Oh, this happened, land happened. Those excuses have not gone away. So if you say you're going to spend on infrastructure and your strike rate is only 40-50%, which is quite typical in India, then that money will be badly spent and then we will have a fiscal crisis. So you must give me your spending battle plan and you must tell me what you will spend the money on, and then I will find the money for it. Now, if you are not confident that you can spend the money, and there's reasonable cause to believe that, because if you're not going to trust the state governments with more money and do it from the center, central spending is very ineffective. We know that. Then I'm afraid the answer to Tamanna is that we are having the wrong conversation. The central government will not be able to finance things because it does not know how to spend money properly.
Now, so why do you think that, the government right now is holding back on a clear plan? We saw one set of an economic package a few months ago. A deeper dive into it showed it was perhaps a bit of massaging and repackaging of schemes to find a very nice headline number of 20 lakh crore rupees. Everyone's waiting for a second set of announcements, but there seems to be a hesitation to go out and make a bold move. Because that's not typically how this government moves. Why do you think that hesitation is there?
Because this government, any government in India, is not this particular political administration. For a long time, the government of India has seen declining capacity to implement, complete and finish. And that includes the fiscal side. That is one. Two, the government of India, therefore, in my view, is a very underconfident government. I'll give you a simple example. This government has been unable to give me a prediction of what the growth rate will be next year. It's been unable to modify its growth forecast for this year. Why this government? Even the RBI is lagging me. The RBI is lagging me. And they're getting it wrong. And then they're correcting. So a government that can't even have the self-confidence to tell you what kind of economic hit we are going to take over the year, is a government that is more interested in event management. And frankly, I don't blame them, because all the people of India seem to want is event management. You're going through a COVID crisis. You have the biggest downturn in history. People are suffering economically. Society is riven, and people are talking about mujhe drugs do. So then you don't have accountability, because the people of India are now on something. And they will suffer the consequences like we all do. If we don't pay attention to our lives, our careers, and the serious things of life, and we want to play games, then we as a nation will go down the hole. And that is what is happening. Don't blame the government.
Well, I will end it on that note, Rathin, but all I will say is that each one of us can do what we should to the best of our ability. Here we are keeping our focus on the issues that matter, on the questions that are truly relevant to what we are experiencing, a once-in-a-lifetime situation that we're experiencing today. And I want to thank you for joining us on this conversation.
Thank you, and I just wish that more people watch ET Now instead of some of the channels I could name, because that's a bit like an alcoholic every evening, drowning their evening in vicarious sorrow and waking up to the cold light of the day with nothing to look forward to. Of course, if we band it together as a society and as an economy, the government will respond. But we have to start ordering. We have to have some kind of order of priority. And the order of priority at this moment seems to be whether some film star aided somebody's suicide or not. In the middle of the biggest crisis, existential crisis in the history of this country. Why blame the government? Let's look inward.
Yeah. Well, we can only blame ourselves for those diversionary tactics and for being diverted. But here, our attempt, once again, will continue to keep the focus on the issues that matter. Thank you so much.
Whole part. Thank you.